Toyota is launching a new version of its bestseller, the RAV4, but there are some headwinds when it comes to tariffs, and of course that involves where they make them.
Welcome back. Automakers caught in the crosshairs of the trade war, and that is putting big pressure on a company like Toyota.
You're watching 800,000 American jobs vanish in real time, and it started with something you'd never suspect. Japanese executives bowing respectfully while destroying 40 years of American manufacturing. Toyota's departure isn't just another factory closing. It's the blueprint for how your employer could abandon you tomorrow while smiling politely. How did communities that transformed themselves into Little Japan end up discarded by the very culture they embraced? Why are other foreign manufacturers already calculating their own American exits? And most critically, what does this mean for your family's financial future when even the most stable employers can disappear overnight? Watch now to know how to protect your future before it's too late. The Golden Era. Georgetown, Kentucky, 1988. A small town that would become the symbol of international cooperation and shared prosperity. Toyota's first major American manufacturing facility represented more than a business decision. It was a cultural exchange transforming an entire region. They promised us lifetime employment, Japanese-style job security, recalls Martha Henderson, among the first American workers hired. They didn't just want our labor. They wanted us to become part of their family, to embrace their philosophy. The transformation was remarkable. Georgetown became Little Japan. Japanese restaurants opened along Main Street. Cultural centers hosted tea ceremonies and martial arts classes. Sister city relationships blossomed with communities across Japan. American workers studied Toyota's philosophy and embraced concepts like respect for people and long-term thinking. At its peak, Toyota manufactured 4 million vehicles annually on American soil. The Kentucky plant alone employed 14,000 workers directly, with another 60,000 jobs throughout the Supplier network. The impact transcended numbers. Toyota created a new model for how foreign companies could integrate into American communities. The economic integration was breathtaking. Toyota built an ecosystem spanning 15 states with suppliers depending on Toyota for up to 90% of their business. Small towns across the Midwest and South found new life as parts manufacturers and logistics centers. Workers felt genuinely valued. They treated us different, explains James Cooper, a 25-year Toyota veteran. Not like replaceable parts, but like craftsmen. They invested in our training, our development, our families. Yet behind the respectful smiles and family atmosphere, something sinister was brewing in Tokyo boardrooms. Calculations that would destroy everything, the silent calculations. While American media focused on Ford and GM's struggles, Toyota's executives conducted their own brutal assessment. In Tokyo Bay conference rooms, leadership analyzed spreadsheets telling an increasingly uncomfortable story. American labor costs had risen 43% since 2020. What had once been Toyota's competitive advantage, skilled American workers at reasonable wages, was becoming an expensive liability. Cultural differences had evolved from charming to problematic. Internal documents revealed growing frustration within Toyota's leadership. Despite years of training, American workers resisted Toyota's demands for flexibility and dedication. Over time, disputes increased. Safety complaints multiplied. The respectful deference of Japanese workplace relationships was replaced by American-style advocacy. The Americans want to be partners when it suits them, but employees when it doesn't, one internal memo noted. They embrace our philosophy of respect for people, but reject our expectations of sacrifice. Market pressures intensified these tensions. Chinese competitors produced vehicles at costs that made even Toyota's efficient American operations look expensive. Global supply chain disruptions revealed the vulnerability of far-flung manufacturing networks, and younger American consumers increasingly chose vehicles based on price rather than manufacturing location. The numbers became impossible to ignore. Every American-made vehicle cost Toyota $2,300 more than the same vehicle produced in Mexico or China. Multiplied by 4 million annual units, Toyota faced nearly $10 billion in additional costs simply for manufacturing in America. Perhaps most damaging was the realization that American operations no longer drove innovation. The cutting-edge techniques and technological breakthroughs were happening elsewhere. American facilities had become mere assembly operations. When innovation dies, closure follows. The warning signs were everywhere, yet no one recognized the approaching catastrophe. Warnings missed and the coming storm. The warning signs were subtle but unmistakable. Capital investment in American facilities began declining in 2022. Facility upgrades were delayed. New model assignments went elsewhere. Executive visits from Japan became less frequent and more perfunctory. But America wasn't paying attention. Local leaders interpreted Toyota's continued politeness as commitment. Workers assumed their productivity had earned them security. Politicians took Toyota's presence for granted, focusing instead on domestic companies they assumed were less stable. "We thought they needed us more than we needed them," admits Georgetown Mayor Tom Prather. "They had invested so much. How could they just walk away?" The media remained blind to the gathering storm, continuing to treat Toyota as the stable anchor of American automotive manufacturing, while focusing on Ford's struggles and GM's labor disputes. Even when a final American delegation traveled to Tokyo in a last-ditch effort to address concerns, they received only polite smiles and non-committal responses. The Americans offered tax incentives, regulatory flexibility, even direct subsidies. The Japanese executives bowed respectfully and promised to consider the proposals. What the Americans didn't realize was that the decision had already been made. The polite meetings and careful evaluation were elaborate theater designed to maintain dignity while delivering devastating news. The announcement would come not with American-style drama, but with Japanese-style precision, a carefully choreographed revelation that would destroy 40,000 jobs with the same respectful formality used to end a tea ceremony. Japanese precision was about to meet American devastation. The announcement strategy was pure corporate genius and pure evil. Look, we dug through thousands of pages of financial reports and industry analysis to uncover this story. You just got the complete picture of Tesla's transformation in minutes. Subscribe if you want more deep dives like this. Calculated announcement. The announcement came on a Friday afternoon during Memorial Day weekend, timing calculated to minimize immediate political response. This wasn't a hasty decision born of quarterly pressure, but surgical precision applied to economic devastation. At exactly 2 p.m. Eastern Time, coordinated press releases appeared across 8 time zones: Tokyo, Georgetown, Detroit, Washington. Each statement identical in its polite language, yet devastating in implications. Toyota Motor Corporation, after 40 years of partnership with American workers and communities, was respectfully withdrawing from United States manufacturing operations. The language was masterful in its corporate diplomacy. No harsh words about American inefficiency. No complaints about regulatory burdens or labor costs. Just respectful acknowledgement that global market conditions required strategic realignment of manufacturing resources. Toyota thanked American workers for their dedication, communities for their support, and government officials for their cooperation. But beneath the polite corporate speak was a brutal message. America was no longer worth the investment. Toyota's executives had studied every major corporate withdrawal in recent history. Rather than defensive justifications or apologetic explanations, Toyota chose dignified acknowledgement. This was presented not as abandonment, but as inevitable business evolution requiring mutual understanding. The timing was brilliant. Memorial Day weekend meant reduced media coverage, distracted politicians, and scattered public attention. By the time Washington returned to work on Tuesday, Toyota's narrative had already been established. The defining image was carefully choreographed. 3 Toyota executives in dark suits, standing before the corporate logo, bowing respectfully to the camera. That 3-second bow, long enough to convey regret, brief enough to maintain dignity, would appear everywhere. The bow that broke America, the respectful bow masked the brutal reality about to hit American workers. Their reactions revealed the true human cost of corporate politeness. Factory floor devastation. "I've been coming through these gates for 23 years, says Linda Martinez, a quality control supervisor. Same time, same entrance, same badge scan. Today, the scanner beeped red and a security guard told me my services were no longer required. Just like that, the cultural betrayal cut deeper than the economic loss. These weren't just jobs being eliminated. These were relationships being severed. Workers who had spent decades learning Japanese management philosophy, who had embraced concepts like continuous improvement and respect for people, suddenly found themselves excluded from the family they thought they had joined. They taught us Kaizen, continuous improvement, explains Robert Chen, a third-generation Toyota worker. They taught us omotenashi, hospitality, and respect. They taught us we were partners, not just employees. Where's the respect now? The immediate reactions ranged from disbelief to rage to profound sadness. Workers stood in the parking lot, still in their work clothes, calling supervisors who weren't answering phones. Some had driven hours to reach the plant, only to discover their careers had ended while they slept. The union response was particularly complex. Toyota's American workers had never organized, trusting in Japanese management philosophy and corporate promises. Now, facing unemployment without collective bargaining agreements, many expressed regret about their previous faith in corporate paternalism. Maybe we should have listened to the UAW organizers, admits Patricia Williams, who had worked in Toyota's paint shop for 18 years. We thought we were special, protected by Japanese business culture. Turns out a pink slip is a pink slip, whether it comes with a bow or a handshake. Worker devastation was just the beginning. The political firestorm that followed would threaten international relationships and ignite a trade war. Political firestorm ignition. Donald Trump's response came within hours, delivered via social media with characteristic fury. Disloyal Toyota betraying American workers after decades of tax breaks and special treatment. They took our money, learned our secrets, then stabbed us in the back. This is why America first matters. The political implications were immediate and explosive. Here was a foreign company abandoning American workers, not because of regulatory pressure or domestic competition, but apparently because America itself was no longer worth the investment. President Biden faced a delicate diplomatic challenge. His statement was carefully measured. We are disappointed by Toyota's decision and will work with affected communities to ensure workers receive the support they need. We remain committed to policies that make America an attractive destination for international manufacturing investment. But measured responses rarely satisfy political crises. Governors across affected states demanded action. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear called an emergency session to address the immediate economic impact. Indiana, Texas, and other states with major Toyota operations began calculating their losses. Congressional hearings were demanded within 48 hours. Senators wanted Toyota executives to appear before Congress to explain their decision. But Toyota's executives, safely in Japan, were under no legal obligation to participate in American political theater. An international incident was brewing. Japan's ambassador received a formal request to meet with State Department officials. The request was polite but firm. Japan needed to explain how a major Japanese corporation could abandon American workers while expecting continued military cooperation and trade relationships. Diplomatic tensions were exploding, but the economic shockwaves were about to devastate entire industries. The financial carnage was just beginning. Economic shockwaves. The financial markets reacted immediately and brutally. Toyota's stock price dropped 8% in Tokyo trading as investors calculated the costs of facility closures, worker severance, and reputation damage. But more significant were the ripple effects throughout the automotive supply chain. Denso Corporation, Toyota's major supplier, faced an immediate crisis, with facilities across the American Midwest designed specifically to serve Toyota's operations. Denso was forced to choose between following Toyota's departure or maintaining American operations without their primary customer. American parts manufacturers were devastated. Companies like Tower International, which derived 90% of their revenue from Toyota contracts, faced immediate bankruptcy threats. The 60-day termination notices required by federal law provided little buffer against complete business collapse. Real estate markets in Toyota-dependent communities began declining immediately. Georgetown home values dropped 15% in the first week as families rushed to sell before the full economic impact became apparent. Commercial real estate faced even steeper declines as businesses dependent on Toyota workers began closing. The currency markets reflected broader concerns about American manufacturing competitiveness. The dollar weakened against the yen as investors interpreted Toyota's departure as evidence of deeper structural problems in American industry. Competitor calculations became immediately relevant. Honda, Nissan, and Mazda operations came under immediate review. The fear spread throughout the foreign automotive sector. If Toyota, the most successful foreign manufacturer in America, could not make American operations profitable, what did that mean for everyone else? What made Toyota's departure particularly painful was not just its economic impact, but its cultural implications. This was a trusted international partner concluding that America was no longer worth the investment. The bow that had opened the announcement became a symbol of everything Americans found frustrating: respectful, polite, and absolutely final. No negotiation, no reconsideration, just a respectful acknowledgement that a 40-year partnership was ending, delivered with the same courtesy used to conclude a business meeting. Economic earthquakes create aftershocks, and what fell next would shock even the most pessimistic analysts. The cascade was unstoppable. The falling dominoes. The dominoes began falling within 72 hours of Toyota's announcement, each toppled piece revealing how deeply the Japanese automaker had embedded itself into American manufacturing. This wasn't just one company leaving. This was an entire ecosystem collapsing, taking with it decades of carefully constructed relationships, investments, and dreams. By Tuesday morning, the true scope of the catastrophe was becoming clear. Toyota had created a vast network of dependencies that stretched across 15 states, employed 800,000 people, and generated over $120 billion in annual economic activity. Now, like a surgeon removing a vital organ, their departure was sending shockwaves through every connected system. The cascade would spare no one. Suppliers who had built their entire business models around Toyota contracts. Communities that had transformed themselves to accommodate Japanese culture and manufacturing philosophy. Workers who had spent decades mastering Toyota's methods. Politicians who had staked their careers on attracting and keeping foreign investment. Denso Corporation faced the most immediate and brutal choice of the entire supplier network. As Toyota's largest parts supplier, with American operations specifically designed to serve Toyota's manufacturing needs, Denso could either follow Toyota's departure or attempt to survive without their primary customer. The numbers were stark. Denso's American facilities generated $4.8 billion in annual revenue, with 87% coming directly from Toyota contracts. Their plants employed thousands producing components exclusively for Toyota vehicles. "We built our entire American operation around Toyota's success," explains Denso America President Hiroshi Nakamura. "Our facilities, our workforce, our technology investments, everything was integrated with Toyota's production. Without Toyota, we're not just losing a customer, we're losing our reason for being in America." The domino effect was accelerating, and suppliers were about to face impossible decisions that would destroy entire companies overnight. Supplier massacre. The decision came within a week. Denso would close its American operations and relocate production to facilities in Mexico and Japan. Another 12,000 jobs lost. Another $4.8 billion in economic activity eliminated. Another piece of America's manufacturing base carved away with surgical precision. But Denso was just the largest domino. Hundreds of smaller suppliers faced even more desperate calculations. Tower International, which manufactured structural components for Toyota vehicles, derived 93% of its revenue from Toyota contracts. With 40-day payment terms and no alternative customers capable of absorbing their production capacity, Tower faced immediate bankruptcy. American Axle Manufacturing, Lear Corporation, Magna International, major suppliers throughout the automotive ecosystem, began receiving the dreaded 60-day termination notices required by federal contract law. Each notice represented not just lost revenue but lost expertise, lost relationships, and lost hope. The desperation was palpable. Supplier executives who had spent decades building relationships with Toyota were now begging Ford and General Motors to absorb their production capacity. But American automakers, facing their own challenges, were in no position to provide rescue packages. The negotiations were brutal, with suppliers forced to accept contracts at 30 to 40% below their Toyota rates, just to maintain some revenue stream. "We're selling at a loss just to keep the lights on," admits one supplier executive who requested anonymity. "But what choice do we have? Close immediately or slowly bleed to death? At least bleeding gives us time to hope for a miracle." Meanwhile, Georgetown, Kentucky had transformed itself over 4 decades to become the perfect host for Toyota's American operations. Japanese restaurants lined Main Street. The community center offered Japanese language classes. Sister city relationships with communities in Japan brought cultural exchanges. The town had literally reinvented itself around Toyota's presence. Now, Georgetown confronted not just economic collapse, but identity crisis. What happens to little Japan when Japan leaves? Community Collapse Chronicles. Mayor Tom Prather received the devastating projections within days of Toyota's announcement. The plant closure would eliminate 2% of the city's tax base. Local unemployment would reach 28%. Property values would decline by an estimated 30 to 40%. Businesses dependent on Toyota workers' spending would close within months. "We didn't just host Toyota," Prather explains. "We became Toyota. Our festivals, our cultural programs, our economic development strategy, our international relationships, everything was built around being Toyota's American home. Without Toyota, we're not just unemployed, we're homeless in our own town." The human cost was immediate and visible. Main Street's Sakura restaurant, which had served authentic Japanese cuisine to Toyota executives and workers for 32 years, announced closure within 2 weeks. Owner Kenji Yamamoto, who had immigrated from Nagoya to serve the Toyota community, faced a heartbreaking choice: return to Japan or remain in a town that no longer needed his cultural bridge. Georgetown's public school system faced catastrophic budget cuts. Property tax revenues would decline by 60% over the next 2 years as families relocated and home values collapsed. The district's highly regarded Japanese immersion program would be eliminated. Advanced manufacturing courses designed specifically for Toyota careers would be canceled. Scott County Hospital began planning service reductions as patient populations declined and insurance coverage disappeared with lost employment. The facility had invested millions to meet Toyota's occupational health requirements. Now, with the patient base evaporating, the hospital faced potential closure within 18 months. But perhaps most painful was the collapse of international relationships that had defined Georgetown's identity. Sister city partnerships with communities in Japan were quietly terminated. The annual Cherry Blossom Festival, which had celebrated Japanese-American friendship for 3 decades, was canceled indefinitely. Georgetown's cultural death was spreading. What happened to other foreign manufacturers next proved that Toyota's departure was just the beginning. Competitor contagion and political fallout. Honda executives at their Marysville, Ohio facility received an urgent conference call from Tokyo within 48 hours of Toyota's announcement. The message was clear: conduct immediate analysis of American operations' long-term viability. If Toyota couldn't make American manufacturing profitable, what did that mean for Honda? The review was thorough and terrifying. Honda's American operations faced many of the same cost pressures that had driven Toyota's departure. Labor costs had risen 38% since 2020. Regulatory compliance costs continued increasing. Most concerning was the market analysis. American consumers were increasingly choosing vehicles based on price rather than manufacturing location. The contagion spread quickly. Nissan's Tennessee operations underwent similar emergency evaluation. Mazda's Newer, Alabama facility faced the most immediate scrutiny. The concerns extended beyond Japanese manufacturers. Hyundai, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz facilities all underwent emergency cost analysis. Foreign investment in American manufacturing, which had provided stability and growth for decades, was suddenly viewed as potentially unsustainable. Volkswagen quietly canceled plans for a second American assembly facility. Subaru delayed expansion of their Indiana operations. The message spread throughout international manufacturing circles. America was no longer a reliable destination for long-term investment. Meanwhile, politicians across the spectrum seized on Toyota's departure as vindication of their positions. Donald Trump's campaign immediately incorporated it into attack advertisements. Even our allies are abandoning American workers. Only America First policies can prevent this betrayal. Progressive Democrats used it as evidence of corporate globalization's failures. This is what happens when we trust multinational corporations over American workers. Senator Bernie Sanders declared, "Companies have no loyalty except to profit margins." The international relations implications were particularly sensitive. Japan remained America's crucial ally in confronting China. Criticizing Toyota too harshly risked damaging relationships that extended far beyond automotive manufacturing. The cascade of consequences was accelerating, and no one seemed capable of stopping the collapse that Toyota's respectful departure had initiated. The collapse was unstoppable, but what emerged from the wreckage 6 months later revealed the true cost of Toyota's Toyota's respectful betrayal. The empty monuments. 6 months after Toyota's respectful departure, the transformation was undeniable. This wasn't merely corporate restructuring, but the emergence of a new industrial reality, where manufacturing expertise could vanish overnight, stable communities could be abandoned by foreign partners, and globalization revealed itself as a fragile illusion. The empty Toyota factories stood as monuments to a failed experiment. Massive facilities once humming with activity, now echoed with silence. Parking lots previously filled with workers' cars were populated only by security guards and real estate assessors calculating liquidation values. Infrastructure built specifically for Toyota had become expensive reminders of how quickly industrial partnerships could dissolve. The phenomenon spread beyond the traditional Rust Belt into regions that had considered themselves immune to industrial decline. The South, which had attracted foreign manufacturers with promises of lower costs and business-friendly policies, discovered that competitive advantage could evaporate instantly. Economists called these manufacturing deserts, regions where industrial infrastructure existed but served no productive purpose. Georgetown's specialized assembly lines and precision equipment couldn't be repurposed. The investment was too specialized, too integrated with Japanese manufacturing philosophy to transfer to other companies. The ripple effects extended beyond automotive manufacturing. Toyota's supplier network collapse eliminated expertise in precision manufacturing, just-in-time logistics, and quality control systems developed over decades. Workers who had mastered these techniques scattered to service industries, construction jobs, and early retirement, taking their knowledge with them. Scattered knowledge was tragic, but the political hollow victory that emerged from Toyota's departure was even more disturbing. The political hollow victory. Toyota's departure forced an uncomfortable political reckoning. The bipartisan consensus supporting international trade fractured immediately. Progressive Democrats claimed corporate globalization had betrayed workers. Conservative Republicans blamed excessive regulation. Moderates struggled to find middle ground. If tax incentives and business-friendly policies couldn't keep Toyota in America, what economic development strategies remained viable? The electoral consequences were devastating. Voters had lost not just jobs, but faith in the promise that international cooperation could provide stability. The respectful manner of Toyota's departure made the damage worse. There was no villain to blame, no obvious policy to fix. For decades, American leaders had demanded foreign companies choose between American workers and global cost optimization. Toyota chose to leave. The victory felt hollow because it revealed the fundamental contradiction in American economic nationalism. Politicians had spent years criticizing companies for prioritizing profits over workers. Toyota proved these criticisms accurate, yet being right provided no protection against abandonment. America was achieving industrial independence no one wanted. The cost? Not just lost jobs, but 4 decades of expertise, standards, and competitive pressure that had elevated American manufacturing capabilities. What about your community? Is it relying on foreign companies that could bow out tomorrow? Have your local politicians created sustainable economic plans or merely temporary partnerships? Share your thoughts in the comments. Are there warning signs in your area we should discuss? Thank you for joining this important conversation. Your perspective matters more than ever in this new economic reality.